Welcome to the podcast of the Political Page blog with commentary from an attorney and entrepreneur on the political and social issues of the day, from a rationalist, libertarian, and often irreverent perspective. This is Political Page, and here's what's on my mind today. Hello and welcome to the podcast of the 25th of June, 2019. This one's entitled Hardball. You have to be willing to walk. You know, I once had a business associate tell a senior partner in my law firm, stick to heavy-handed negotiation. Now, he may have meant that comment as snark, but you know what? It resonated, because over the next 20 years, I watched that partner, and he would balance a hefty carrot with a brutal stick in negotiation after negotiation, and it was really successful. It worked. You know, people won't do what you want them to do nearly as quickly for a simple reward as they will if you give them a choice between that reward and a very uncomfortable alternative. It's human nature. Which brings us to Donald Trump, because he is the master of manipulating human nature, is he not? From the time that he wrote The Art of the Deal, what was that, back in the 80s, right? Numerous subsequent books, all the way throughout his very public life as a businessman, Donald Trump has made it eminently clear to anybody who pays any attention that he favors heavy-handed negotiation. You know, it's like the old joke about the animal trainer who's asked how he manages mules so well. He picks up a board, smacks the animal on the head. First, he says, you have to get their attention. Trump gets their attention first. He scares the bejeezus out of them with something they are horrified to suspect he might just be crazy enough to actually do. And then when they're well and good scared, he tells them how he can make it all better instead. You know, Bloomberg noted that walking out of a meeting is a famous standard Trump tactic, because not only does walking away get the attention of his opponents, but it makes them very, very nervous over what exactly is going to happen to the whole negotiation if he simply doesn't come back. I mean, he even walked out on a judge once in a trial, and he won the case eventually. You know, he starts out by asking for an extreme thing. He threatens equal extremes if he doesn't get it, and then he offers something very sweet if he does get it, and progressively moderates each position toward the middle until he leads the opponent precisely to where he wanted them in the beginning. And it only works. It only works because they know he is quite willing to do that awful thing that he threatened at the outset. But he'll also do that nice thing he said. He really will walk out. He will walk away. He will scorch the earth behind him and just move on to the next opportunity. Or, hey, everyone can be happy. It's their choice. He's not the first. This is standard business tactics. Remember the howls of outrage when Ronald Reagan walked out of the meeting in Reykjavik? He was meeting with Mikhail Gorbachev. Headlines screamed in agony over, how humiliating the behavior of the American president was. You simply don't walk out of a meeting with the Russian premier. Reagan flubs the summit, was what Rolling Stone said. Washington Post was a little bit more careful in what they said. They mentioned that he had simply been outmaneuvered. Everyone was appalled. But Reagan was just crazy enough to use the big stick of the American president walking away, the unheard of resort of just walking off. And it worked. And decades later, that single action by Reagan is widely recognized to have ended the costly and terrifying decades of the American-Soviet Cold War. Successful negotiation takes a stick and a carrot. Barack Obama simply had the carrot, and it got him absolutely nowhere. He made an absolute fool of himself and the United States. Ronald Reagan knew how to negotiate, and Donald Trump knows how to negotiate, and only the American left seems utterly incapable of understanding any of it. Trump openly tells them ahead of time that he likes to get people nervous at the early stages of a negotiation by any means necessary, and then, stage set, he negotiates from strength. And he uses the perception of the press and of the people that he's negotiating with that he is somehow perhaps a little irrational. I mean, they're always wondering, would he really do this? He uses that as part of the game. And every time he does it as the president, oh my God, the left goes hysterical, insists it's not only ineffective, it's insane, it's apocalyptic, it is utterly doomed to failure, and then it works. There are so many examples of this, but let's just take two. We're going to take the two most recent ones. They both happen to have been this month in June. He had two different opponents. He had Mexico and he had Nancy Pelosi, and with both of them the subject was immigration. Now, Mexico and Pelosi have something in common. Neither one of them are particularly astute, and both of them habitually resort to crass emotional manipulation in lieu of fact, because the press goes along with them and it works. But both of them this month were subjected to a broadside of heavy-handed Trumpian negotiation, and both of them folded like origami. Let's take Mexico first. Remember what happened? Trump opened by threatening massive tariffs against Mexico unless they finally acted as a strong buffer between the Central American hordes that are coming across the U.S. border and us. And until that point, for decades, Mexico has been giving nothing other than lip service to helping us out on the southern border. They openly offer transportation. They've created this thing called a passage visa that lets people go through their country as long as they promise they're trying to get in here illegally. They have offered tons of aid to this massive tsunami of uneducated, unvetted humanity streaming into the United States. And earlier this month, Trump had simply had enough. He said that Mexico had better belly up to the bar or he was going to put 5% tariffs on everything they brought into the country. And of course, the usual suspects erupted saying this was never going to work. And not only would it not work, it would be a disaster. The usual suspects being what? The mainstream media, the Democrats, and also the whiny, never-Trump Republicans, the ones who routinely wring their hands whenever the president takes a position firmer than a grandma negotiating with a toddler over a second cookie. Oh, it would not only not work, it would jeopardize the entire United States economy. I mean, Mexico would retaliate. Everything would spiral into economic chaos. We would all starve from a dearth of imported avocado. Then Mexico folded. In the past 2 weeks since it agreed to cooperate, finally, Mexico has sent 15,000, think about that, 15,000 troops to the U.S.-Mexico border to try to secure it. They've sent another 2,000 National Guard to their southern border, which is quite short with Guatemala, bringing the number of troops they have posted there now to almost 7,000. So apparently, notwithstanding what the intelligentsia told us, there were some things that Mexico could do to start shoring up these borders. But that's not really the most important thing. The most important thing is this. Mexico signed a binding agreement. What it said was this. If within 45 days adding these troops does not stem the flow of migration into the United States, they are going to reduce to legislation an agreement to become what they call a safe third nation. All that means is that the asylum seekers that we collect up are no longer going to be released into the American heartland. They are going to be sent back to Mexico, where they are going to spend the months in that kind of grotty nation waiting for their hearing to happen, and they're going to attend the hearing instead of just disappearing into the United States like 90% of them now do. It is absolute genius because Mexico kind of saves face by not agreeing right away to be a safe third nation. What they're going to do is try the troops first, and the chances are the troops will not stem the flow, at which point they become safe third nation. And safe third nation is game, set, match Trump. It is the gold ring of immigration policy. Now, Mexico might be a little bitter about this, but hey, that's negotiation. That's the way Trump does it. Such is life. Which brings us to another bitter vanquished opponent, Nancy Pelosi, and I'll give short shrift to this because she doesn't deserve much more. Because what Trump did was this. On the day that he announced he was going to run again for president in 2020, he also announced that he had directed ICE to do massive raids across the United States to collect up all of the criminal illegal immigrants who had already been given due process, gone up in front of a judge, and been told by a judge they had to leave the country. He was going to start that right away. He announced that on a Tuesday. Nancy Pelosi and her party did the usual howls of protest and angst. It was cruel. It is heartless. He's terrifying America's children, and Trump just shrugged. And by Friday, the storm of hysterical invective having had absolutely no effect on Trump whatsoever, Pelosi folded like a kindergarten origami project, called Trump up, and asked him to please delay the deportations while Congress has a chance to act. And act they have. They've already released some of the funding, which allows him to beef up the holding facilities and at the same time guts their concentration camp meme, because really the reason the holding facilities are so awful are because Congress refused to fund them. So already she's given in on that, and we'll see what she does over the next 2 weeks, because they know that Trump is playing hardball. They know that if they don't get something done, he is going to unleash ICE, and they're going to round these people up, and it's going to start. He's playing hardball. He will metaphorically walk out of the room, and they know it. Hardball. It works. Thank you for tuning in to the Political Page podcast today. Original blog articles, complete with a lot more information and great links to original source material, can be found anytime on politicalpage.net. That's political, P-A-I-G-E, .net.